Welcome back. We're again with our pie chart, and we've just talked about colors in a previous video. And so now what we want to do is apply those colors to this pie chart. Right now, the colors really don't go with our story. We're saying most Pennsylvania residents have been married, but then there's nothing in this coloration that really tells us that we're separating this chart into something like currently married, widowed, and divorced as connected by having been married versus never married. It's kind of there because never married is red and these other ones are sort of cooler colors, but we can do a better job connecting this. And in particular, if we go back to the color palette we settled on, what you can see is that we have a bunch of warm colors now that are clearly related together and one color that's sort of cool and gray. And so we can assign our divorced and widowed and currently married to these colors, and then give the never married this sort of charcoal color here. So let's go ahead and do that. And when we look up here in the code where we're generating the figure, we notice that we place the value in the labels for these slices here inside the add pie method. And so you might expect that if we want to control the color, we will also be able to do so inside the add pie. And in fact, that's true. How we're going to do that is we're going to control what are called the markers. The markers are the sort of general term that Plotly has for the things that represent data. So here's the slices. In a bar chart, it would be a bar. In a scatter chart, it would be the individual markers, which is where the name comes from. And so this is generally how we're going to control the things that are associated with particular points of data. Now, we have to introduce a new idea, which is that we need a dictionary for this. And in Python, we call a dictionary by saying dict and then having these parentheses. There's actually two ways to do it. This is the way we're going to do it. And in here, we can specify a series of keys and values. And the way we have a key is we just write it out. So we're going to say colors, and then we're going to give it values. And so equals, and we're going to need a list of colors that corresponds to these values here. Okay, so this actually kind of looks a lot like what we are already seeing in the function call, where we had this method and then we had this named thing. This is actually called a keyword argument, and we gave it a value. So we're kind of used to this already, but we do have to tell it that this is going to be a dictionary coming in. The colors, how we specify them is with strings. And we could use like named colors that are in Python, but we also are in Plotly, but we also had gone to this Coolers website and picked colors. So we can copy the hex code and go back and paste that in. So this will assign the color with one difference, which is we need to put a pound sign in front. It's standard in writing HTML code to put the pound sign in front of these 6 numbers in order to tell it that this is going to be a hexadecimal color. So we do the same thing here, and then we move on to the next. So this dark red is associated with currently married. Then we'll have divorced, and then never married and widowed. So we'll come back here, we'll take the next darkest one, and we will go back in and we'll assign that the next value. And then the next thing that we need the color for is never married. When we think about our color palette, that's the gray one. And so we'll come back here, we'll go to our Marimo, we'll paste in those numbers. And then the last one we need is the widowed, and that is going to be back here in our coolers, the lightest colored one. All right, so we come back here, we hit paste. Now, when I run this, it's going to pair up the colors with the values in the same order that they appeared. So let's go ahead and see what happens. So one thing you'll see is that I did not get what I wanted, and it's giving me an error, and it says invalid property specified markers. Did you mean marker? And in fact, I did. So in Plotly, I don't need to say markers, I need to say marker. And so you'll get these messages that are a little helpful if you read them. I'll hit run. And now you see that I have outputted this in the colors that we chose. Now, one thing that's kind of maybe off about this is that I went from a dark color to a very light color to a darker color. And so what I could do is reverse the order of these two. And so what I want to do is change widowed and divorced. So let's go ahead and just copy this out. I'll put that there. I'll select this one and I'll move it back over here. If I run that, you'll see now it runs in this order. Then we could think about, like, do I like how dark this is? Maybe now that I see this in this chart, I could think about picking a slightly different color. So let's go back here. Maybe I want something that's a lot lighter. And so let's copy this hex code and go back and put that in for never married and see what I think. Okay, to me, that looks a little bit better. We went from dark to lighter to lighter to lightest. And then we also moved from something that was kind of a warm color into a cold color. And then something that's sort of grayed out that is not associated with what we're claiming in the title. And so I think it kind of like all works out that way. It makes a pretty well-formed plot. Now, there are things that we could think about changing, like it went white text, and then black text and black text. We could change that. There are ways to do that inside of Plotly. You could do it inside of Boxy, but we're going to think about how to change fonts and things like that in a future video. So we're not going to worry about it right now. If you wanted to do that, we still have this line that has saving it as an SVG. So you could download that and change things however you want inside of a program like Boxy. We're going to use this in order to check for color blindness actually in a future video. And so there's two ways that we can get this. We're going to need a bitmap. I can either change this to save a bitmap, or again, I can come here and just say download plot as PNG. Now that I have that plot downloaded as a PNG, in another video, I'll show you how you can check for color blindness of this exact figure. I know we've checked before when we were doing things with our palette here for color blindness, but it's always nice to check in the final finished product to make sure that something strange isn't happening. And we'll talk about that a little bit more in the course as well. But we'll see how to do it in the next video.